This is the Road to the Kentucky Derby, presented by Woodford Reserve.
The preps have been run, the points have been earned, horses are funneling into Churchill Downs in advance of the 144th running of the Kentucky Derby, presented by Woodford Reserve. Joe Christofek joined by Ed DeRosa and James Scully of TwinSpires.com. And guys, it has been an interesting run leading up to the Kentucky Derby, a magical string of prep races, especially recently. Ed, let's start with you. Talk about the quality of this three-year-old crop and kind of the turning point for you this spring where you said, man, this is going to be good.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a very quality crop. I'm very excited to not only watch them run, but actually bet on them. The talent at the top is top-notch, and there's a lot of depth. I think all 20, some people will make a case for, I won't, but that's what makes it a fun betting race. For me, Justify earned his favoritism, clear favorite, but Todd Pletcher, I mean, you talk about magical, what he's done to up his game. I mean, every year it's the Todd show, and somehow his encore this year was better than anything he's done to date. Will mean the roses for a third time? We'll find out, but to me, he's the headline of this point season and what's been a great group.
You mentioned Justify. I mean, for me, that was the turning point when he broke his maiden and people started to get excited about him, and then Magnum Moon asserting himself, and then Mendelssohn winning the UAE Derby by multiple lengths. It just kept getting better and better and better. And then Good Magic said, you know what, I ran third in the Fountain of Youth, but I'm going to come back and win the Bluegrass. So everything seems to be falling into place, James.
Yeah, and Justify, I mean, when he came along in March, I thought on March 11th when he won that allowance race, that really changed the whole outlook for this Kentucky Derby. His performance sort of set the tone. A couple of weeks later, we had Magnum Moon come along, and it's just the talent at the top is so deep this year that I've never been so excited for a Kentucky Derby.
Well, guys, we hear about it every year. The Apollo curse, 136 years. No horse that did not race as a 2-year-old has won the Kentucky Derby. We've seen some names like Curlin, Verrazano, Bodemeister in recent years, talented horses that were unable to do it. Ed, let's start with you. How important is the Apollo curse? 2 horses at the top of the list this year, both major contenders in the Kentucky Derby. Justify and Magnum Moon are trying to break that curse.
Yeah, it's everything to me. I'm an Apollo truther, as I like to say. I think it's so cool that a race of this magnitude still has something germane to it that happened 136 years ago. So even separate from the handicapping angle, I just think it's really cool that it's even something to talk about. But I'm a believer. I just think this is such a tough race, and the brilliance at 2 holds so much sway on how horses perform in this race that I think it is a factor, and at a short price I'm definitely willing to bet against it. Now if we were talking about a 20 or 30 to 1 horse, like say if Hofburg hadn't started at 2 and just came on, then maybe you take a shot, but at 5 to 2 and 6 or 8 to 1, I'm definitely I'm willing to let 136 years of history back my bets.
Now I agree with the development aspect of it. Horses have to be able to move forward and progress in their careers both physically and mentally, and the Apollo curse has a lot to do with it because you didn't race at 2, so maybe you don't have the foundation. But I also believe that every year is an individual year, every horse is an individual horse, every race is an individual Kentucky Derby, so maybe horses can overcome that based on who they are individually. James, Justify, he's done a lot in a short time. Magnum Moon has done a little bit more. He's already got 2 graded stakes wins under his belt. What are your thoughts on the whole Apollo curse, Justify and Magnum Moon, and their ability to be the one?
Well, I do think Magnum Moon has an advantage. I do think that there's a potential for this curse to fall with a horse that makes his debut in January. But Foundation is still the most, for the Kentucky Derby, it's the biggest, more important for the Kentucky Derby than any other race in the United States. But with 4 starts with Magnum Moon, that is an edge for him. If the horse does come along and do it, it's going to be a horse in that vein in my eyes, not Justify.
Well, let's talk about Magnum Moon and Justify as individuals. Ed, first, your thoughts on each of those horses, their ability to maybe do it, and why you're against them, because their odds are going to be low.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Baffert had Bodemeister, so he's been through this before. Pletcher had Verrazano, so they sort of know the drill. After the Arkansas Derby, Pletcher said, look, these trends have been falling, more time before the Derby days, longer spacing between prep races, maybe the Apollo curse is next. To me, I think Justify has shown more brilliance and is probably the overall better talent. But breeding-wise, and we'll probably end up talking about this with Mendelssohn too, Stormcat line, for the Derby, Magnum Moon sire already has a winner in Orb. So from a pedigree standpoint, I like Magnum Moon a little more. But to me, the key, you mentioned it, the short price. They have two great trainers. They've showed brilliance on the track, but mile and a quarter under those twin spires, totally different ball game.
The way they finished the races, James, at a mile and an eighth, says to me that maybe a mile and a quarter is within their scope. Justifies face short fields. He's had things his own way in all three of his starts. Magnum Moon, maybe a little bit more foundation, and he's drawn away from his rivals at the end, maybe some tougher fields overall that he's faced. Who do you prefer?
Well, I do prefer like Magnum Moon's seasoning, but I will say that both Justify and Magnum Moon have a forward running style, and perhaps that has hurt like horses in the past, like Kerwin and others that have had to deal with traffic. So that is a little bit of an edge for both horses, the fact that they will potentially be able to avoid traffic early. But I agree with Ed, Justify is the more talented of the two, just in raw talent, but I do like the seasoning. 4 starts to 3 is an edge in my mind.
This is a horse that has kind of turned the Kentucky Derby field on its ear with the performance in the UAE Derby. Trained by Aidan O'Brien, who last year won 28 Group or Grade 1 races, breaking Bobby Frankel's all-time record. But James, he's winless in the Kentucky Derby from a handful of starts. Master of Hounds, probably his best horse that he's sent here. But Mendelssohn, for lack of a better word, is an animal.
Yeah, an absolute animal, and unlike his previous Kentucky Derby starters who only had 1 prep for the Kentucky Derby, he's had 2, Mendelssohn, and he improved significantly upon his first race on Polytrack. And what I really love about Mendelssohn is his high cruising speed. He's going to put himself into the race from the start, and what we saw in the UAE Derby was like an extra gear. The way he accelerated into the stretch, he turned a 7 or 8 length lead into an 18.5 length lead at the wire, a mile and 3/16 distance, no problem. And I really think he's going to take another step forward for Aidan O'Brien.
He costs $3 million. He's a half-to beholder, earned over $6 million in her illustrious career, won the Grade 1 Pacific Classic over the boys going a mile and a quarter. Also a half-to Into Mischief, who's one of the best sires going right now. He's supposed to be good, Ed.
And he is. There are questions, though. Dubai is always a sticking point for me. Don't usually love horses making that ship. And you mentioned the breeding. Now, Beholder went a mile and a quarter, and she's by Henny Hughes. And even though Mendelssohn has the aforementioned with Justify, Stormcat curse, the line's winless in the Derby, you do have some hope that is, half-sibling one with Henny Hughes going a mile and a quarter. So to me, of the top 3 choices, Justify, Mendelssohn, and Magnum Moon, I definitely like Mendelssohn best, and James has mentioned before, and I agree with him. I think Mendelssohn's going to be the second choice, but I definitely prefer him to the other 2.
Let's get into that more, James. Why you think he's going to be the second choice, and you too, Ed. This is a horse who won in Dubai, but everybody won on the lead in Dubai. Only Mind Your Biscuits didn't, I think, win wire to wire during the course of the carnival.
No one won by 19, though.
Yeah, very true. Dirt in the face, that's another thing. And he's not going to get here until just a handful of days before the Kentucky Derby. Why is he going to get so much action in the win pool?
Well, he's owned by Coolmore, and one of the partners in Coolmore is Michael Tabor, a renowned bettor, bookmaker, and they like to bet. And I do think that they are going to throw down on him. Once he won that UAE Derby, he was the solid favorite in the European pools. If they're betting him overseas, they're taking like 2-to-1 odds on Mendelssohn. They're looking at maybe 5-to-1 in the Kentucky Derby, and I think they're coming to make a big coup on it. I think they have the horse, and he certainly was sensational last time.
At 5-to-1 in the Kentucky Derby, Ed, for you, is he playable?
He's definitely playable in the exotics. I just think the other 2 are going to be so overbet, and I prefer Mendelssohn. Now, there is a story about Coolmore that after Thunder Gulch won, they were basically swimming in the cash at their hotel room. They bet to win. I'll bet exactas, the Oaks Derby double, superfecta, plenty of other ways to make my opinion on Mendelssohn count, but he's definitely the one I want most of the favorites.
Well, with his win last year with Always Dreaming, Todd Pletcher is now 2 for 48 in the Kentucky Derby, the other win coming with Super Saver. And he always seems to become loaded for bear. He was the master last year of winning the prep races leading up, and he even one-upped himself this year by winning 4 of the 100-point races at DeRosa. Audible, Vino Rosso, Noble Indy, and of course Magnum Moon. How do you sort them out?
I mean, I sort them out using the Bristnet speed ratings, and Audible has been fastest to me, so that's the one I like best. But to me, what Pletcher did this year sort of reminds me of the Cleveland Indians last year. They had that long winning streak, and everyone was so excited for the regular season, then they flamed out in the playoffs. Todd Pletcher loves to win Grade 1 races. His owners do too. I'm sure they're thrilled with the prep season. But he's going to be here on May 5th to win, and anything short of the Roses will be a disappointment. I do like Audible to give him the best chance, but I actually like Audible, Vino Rosso, and Noble Indy better than Magnum Moon at the expected prices. Magnum Moon's going to be the shortest price. I like him least.
Audible is probably the most accomplished. Magnum Moon might have the most upside, according to most, maybe not Ed. Vino de Rosso's got a lot of upside as well, and the Noble Indy is going to be a part of the early pace, and he's solid too. But James, recent jockey musical chairs were played where Johnny Velasquez stayed on Vino Rosso, Javier Castellano jumped off Bolt Oro to ride Audible. You've got Luis Saez remaining on Magnum Moon, and then the mount right now on Noble Indy is open. What did you make of those jockey musical chairs? Because most people probably would have picked Audible.
Yeah, and it really affected multiple horses with John V riding Audible in his last start and Javier Castellano riding Bolt d'Oro. Both of those horses, it was a little bit of a negative connotation with, you know, John V going to Vino. And Vino's the horse I like the best of them. I think he has the most upside. And what I really liked about him was his move on the far turn of the Wood Memorial. I mean, a lot of times that's where the Kentucky Derby is won, on the far turn. I think, you know, Audible obviously has a good turn of foot as well, but I'll take Vino Rosso's late run in the Kentucky Derby over the other Pletcher
What'd you think about his move trying to put Enticed into the rail?
Well, you know, I think he was like intimidating him, and you know, I'm still like, he's got a horse that has a lot of upside, and maybe placing in the Derby is the more realistic scenario. But I do give him a good chance to run well.
It'd be the right price.
I was against him leading up to the Wood Memorial, and it's not too late for me to jump on the bandwagon because he really did. His second time with blinkers run a much better race, and Entice wasn't beating him that day. So if you look at Vino Rosso, Ed, and you look at Magnum Moon, and you look at the two others, and the prices they're going to be, how much are you utilizing Pletcher in your Derby wagers?
Yeah, Audible for sure. I mean, I just can't ignore the fact that other than Justify, Audible has the fastest Bristnet speed ratings of the U.S. horses. So I got to be a homer there and trust that, hey, this is a fast horse. I do like Vino Rosso with the upside, and it's usually when you miss the wedding, you don't want to go to the funeral, but he's still going to be 15-1 minimum and probably closer to 20-1. So the price is right on him. It seems like the light bulb went off. The other two, not as much for me.
I'm going to disagree with that, though, and say he'll be shorter than Audible. I think he's going to be that wise guy horse. Is going to get, and we'll get into works later, but that's like one point. I think he's going to be a stud.
I owe you 6 lunches. I'd bet them all to get even that Audible will be shorter.
Well, Bolt d'Oro last year, I think, was the most accomplished two-year-old, but Good Magic won the most important race, and he was named Eclipse Award champion. They both had their stumbles moving forward into the Triple Crown season. Bolt d'Oro really wasn't training that well at the beginning, but he kind of got back into form. Good Magic wound up running third in the Fountain of Youth as the odds-on favorite, but he came back and won the Bluegrass. James, let's start with you. How do you assess the last few months for both of these horses leading up to the first Saturday in May?
Well, I'm a little bit concerned about both in their pattern coming to Churchill Downs. I will say that that's been a part of the story this year, is the fact that those two-year-old stars have stumbled in a sense, and these other horses have come along and really made for an exciting field. But I look at Bolt d'Oro, he hasn't finished first in either one of his races. And I've got a little bit of a concern, you know, as far as him thriving in a 1.25 miles, you know, at the trip and having that finishing kick to get the job done. Good Magic, he has a similar profile to last year in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, where he'll be making his third start off the layoff. It's potential, you know, you could say, hey, he could take a big step forward, but I am a little bit concerned. His speed ratings have been lower. I'm a big Bristnet speed rating fan. He got a 105 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and 898 is his top number this year, and that's just too low for me.
I think the Fountain of Youth was the most falsely run, important race. leading up to the Kentucky Derby, with Promises Fulfilled, Strike Power, and then Good Magic being third. But Good Magic came back and won, and did so nicely enough in the Bluegrass. Bolt Arrow lost to probably the horse that's going to be the favorite in the Kentucky Derby, and Justify, so he didn't lose too much luster. He kind of is what I thought he was. Ed, how do you assess the two?
Yeah, I definitely prefer Bolt d'Oro. They're going to be about the same price, so to me, Bolt d'Oro's shown more consistency at the top level. Good Magic, in the Fountain of Youth race, I didn't love that he couldn't outfinish Strike Power. I'm fine that he couldn't get to Promises Fulfilled loose on the lead. And then in the Bluegrass, I felt like it looked like he was going to run away from that field. And Flame Away's a good horse, but to me, there was just some stalling, it seemed, late. He just didn't put away those horses when it looked like he would. So at 10 or 12 to 1, he's not for me. I do prefer Bolt, even though Good Magic's the champ.
Well, guys, we all seem to agree that this is kind of a top-heavy derby. We've talked about 7 horses that we kind of like to varying degrees, but it wouldn't be a Kentucky Derby if we didn't have an off-the-wall long shot that we all liked at least a little bit. Ed, let's start with yours.
I like Hofburg. Audible, I'm a big fan of, and Hofburg was second to him, a non-threatening second, but to me has some upside, being lightly raced. Racing Hall of Fame trainer Bill Mott never won the Derby. Certainly capable, though, has had plenty of big horses in his corner. So to me, 20, 25 to 1, the right price that maybe he takes the next step forward. Going to be using him heavy underneath.
I'm a little bit worried about half the Patriots team, including their star tight end, being here on Derby Day, and all the Patriots fans knocking down the odds on Gronkowski. But to me, you know, his dam is a half to Flashy Bull, who's won graded stakes here at Churchill Downs. He's by Lonhro. He's got some pedigree that suggests that he might like 1.25 miles, and we haven't really seen what he can do yet under those circumstances. He's kind of a total wild card, but a good trainer in Jeremy Noseda, and they've been pointing towards the Derby since the beginning of the spring, when the European road was kind of made a reality. So he's going to be my bomber. James?
I'm going with Flame Away. He's another scat daddy like Mendelssohn and Justify. But what I like about him is he puts himself in position in every race, and he has not lost ground in the stretch, from the top of the stretch to the wire, in any of his 4 starts this year. He's the kind of horse that will also outfinish other horses. He'll be out of gas as well, perhaps in the latter stretch, but there'll be a lot of horses that are tired at that point. If he can get himself in position, I think he can hang on and get a piece of the pie at long odds.
Well, guys, they say that pace makes the race, and we've had some ridiculously fast paces, but most of those pre-Kentucky Derby points era, it's changed a little bit in recent years. But how fast they go and what kind of trips horses get, obviously very, very important. We don't know what's going to happen coming out of the starting gate, obviously, which is completely unpredictable. But James, how do you see this pace scenario unfolding? Who's going to the lead? Who's chasing? Who's closing?
Well, you have to start, I think, with Promises Fulfilled as being forwardly placed. He's never been headed at the first or second call of any of his previous starts. We've seen in the Florida Derby and Fountain of Youth how he just guns it right from the starting gate to the lead. But I do think that beyond him, you're going to see Justify, Mendelssohn, and a potential wild card with Noble Indy. And those are really the forward horses in my mind. And we might have a little bit of a hot opening quarter mile, but I wouldn't be surprised if the fractions are slow down a little bit and a little bit more moderate in the middle stages. I wouldn't be contested more is likely than hot in my eyes.
It's tough to disagree with what James said, because I kind of see it the same way. It looks like there's a tier of, you know, maybe Promises Fulfilled and a bunch of pressers, a handful of stalkers, and then a couple of out of the clouds horses like My Boy Jack and so on and so forth. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, I do. I mean, up top, it's tough for me to see Promises Fulfilled and Justify not being 1-2 or even 2-1, depending on how badly Mike Smith wants to lead on Justify. To me, the interesting tactics will be right behind them. Bravazzo won the Risen Star, chasing down Snapper Sinclair. So, you know, he likes to be close and then run down late. He's a big long shot, but he can have an impact on what horses like Bolt d'Oro, Audible, and Vino Rosso when they make their move. So it's sort of that domino effect, but it all starts with what Justify can get away with turn it on the far turn.
All right, guys, we're going to play a little game called Buy, Sell, or Hold with some of the Kentucky Derby contenders. And we're going to start with Magnum Moon, and I'm going to buy him. I like the stamina that he's shown and the potential to go 1.25 miles, I still think he has a little bit of upside, and I think he might be a forgotten horse with some of the others getting a little bit more hype going into the gate for the Kentucky Derby. Ed?
Well, you can buy my share because I'm selling. Not only is there the Apollo thing going on, but also I don't think he's all that fast at the price I'm selling.
Yeah, I'm going to sell Magnum Moon as well. I'm not really confident in his chances at 1.25 miles, a little bit worried about his trip as well.
All right, Good Magic is the next horse we're going to talk about. Progressive, at least from the Fountain of Youth to the Bluegrass and winning that race. I'm going to hold him. This is a horse that I really want to see train at Churchill Downs. I've been a fan all along, but I need to see a little bit more, so I'm waiting for training leading up to the Derby here at Churchill Downs to make my final decision. James?
I'm going to sell him. I will have him on some of my exotics, but I don't think he can win.
Yeah, I'm selling as well. I just didn't like the way he did. He won, but he didn't pull away from, I thought, inferior animals in the Bluegrass. He's not for me.
Next, we're going to talk about Audible, who's been amazingly impressive this spring. A New York bred. People are like, I don't like the way he trains, but I like the way he runs. So training Derby week for me isn't going to be nearly as important for him. I'm going to buy Audible just because I love the way he attacks the ground. I love what he's done so far. I don't think there's any reason not to like him based on what I've seen, Ed.
Yeah, I agree. I'm buying. Brisnet signs my paychecks. He has some of the best Brisnet ratings. I'm going to cash the checks and use him to bet him on the Derby. I'm a buyer.
I'm going to hold Audible. I respect his turn of foot. The Derby could set up well for his run style, but I'm a little bit concerned about the 1.25 mile distance with his pedigree and worried about him carrying his form forward from Gulfstream Park.
Now, Bolt d'Oro is a horse that everybody loved as a 2-year-old. In the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, he got an excuse because he broke bad. I don't really like the way he's progressed in his 3-year-old year. I'm going to sell him. I still think he has a fan club. I think he's going to go off at 8, maybe upwards of 10 to 1, but even at that price, I don't like. I think we've seen the best of him. I don't think he's going to move forward any more than he has already. James?
Yeah, and I agree. I'm selling him as well. He has not moved forward from his 2-year-old form when he was like a standout performer. I think he's going to come up a little bit short in the Kentucky Derby.
I'm holding. He's one of the few I'm most interested in to see how they work. Trainer Mick Ruiz, not exactly Pletcher or Baffert on the Derby scene. Jockey Espinosa's won it 3 times, so you do like that. But he's one of the ones I'm most keen to see how they work, so I'm holding.
Vino Rosso is a horse that I didn't like early in the Triple Crown season, but he really impressed me in the Wood Memorial. And Johnny Velasquez likes him. He picked him over Audible, so that's good enough for me to say I'm buying Vino Rosso, particularly at odds of 15 to 1-ish. Ed?
Yeah, I'm buying as well. I just think the opportunity to get a Pletcher trained Grade 2 winner, but a 100-point winner that Johnny V picked, that they've had a lot of faith in all year. They were in stakes races because they thought this was one of their Derby horses. Finally proved them right in New York. I'm buying.
I'm buying him as well. I'm a little worried that he'll be bet down a little bit as like a quote-unquote wise guy horse, but I love his turn of foot. I think he's coming into his own right now for Pletcher. Definitely like a top 3 contender in my book.
All right, guys, well, Justify is going to be the likely favorite for the Kentucky Derby, and I'm going to sell him kind of reluctantly only because I think he's going to be overbet. I think the lack of experience may get to him. I think he reminds me a little bit of Point Given, not in the experience department because Point Given certainly was more experienced, but kind of like maybe not running his best race in the Derby, but moving forward in the Preakness, the Belmont, the Travers, et cetera, maybe being the best 3-year-old by the time it's all said and done. For Saturday in May at that price, no, I don't like him. James?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to sell him as well. I won't be surprised to see him hold on for a piece. I think he's definitely going to be forwardly placed in the Derby, but I'm against him for the win.
Yeah, 136 years of history. I'm going to go with Apollo Curse tells me to sell.
Mendelssohn is a horse that we all raved about during the course of our discussions, talked about the fact that he might be bet down a little bit more than we would like, but I think of all the horses in this year's Derby, he's got the potential to be a superstar. He might run 7th, but he might win by 7 lengths. I'm buying Mendelssohn. I absolutely love him.
I'm buying too. I think of all the horses that have come over from Dubai, he has the best chance. Same with Aidan O'Brien. A lot of signs pointing to yes, he's for me.
Yeah, I'm buying him as well. He's my top pick right now. I loved his dirt race. I think he does have a potential to move forward in the Derby.
Entice was second in the Wood Memorial after a really good Gotham win. He lost to Vino Rosso, who is progressive. A lot of people will say that he wants to go 1.25 miles and that he's going to get better. But man, when I see his stride and he's climbing like that, I just can't use him on my Kentucky Derby tickets, at least prominently. I'm selling him, Ed.
I'm buying. He's one of those that if you like him, which I did going into the Wood, some shine is off with the second place finish. He's going to be 25 to 1. To me, he's the looking at Lee or Battle of Midway type that blew up the Super last year. So I'm going to buy him at a big price.
I'm going to sell him. I'm a little worried about him being in traffic. His Gotham, he had a clear path the entire way. I've seen him act, not like being in between horses. And I just look at him as like a Travers horse. He's going to be good later in the year.
Well, guys, we've researched the pedigrees. We've watched all the races probably numerous times. To me, the training leading up to the Kentucky Derby is also important. I want to see these horses in the flesh. I want to see them gallop. I want to see them work. What do you think about Kentucky Derby week training, James?
Oh, I love it. I mean, for me, it might not influence my win selection, but for somebody who loves to play the trifecta and superfecta every year in the Kentucky Derby, the works are important in that process because I'm going to have to, separate the contenders underneath my top pick, and the works are a big part of that.
I think it's really exciting to see these horses every morning on the backstretch, see them train with their saddle towels in front of us and in person. And to me, it's very important. I want to see them in the flesh and how well they're moving and acting leading up to the Kentucky Derby. Ed, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a hype guy. I mean, I love the build up to the Derby, and whether the works play a role in your handicapping or not, the fact that they're happening and there's so much attention being paid to them, I think adds to sort of the lure of the Derby. From a handicapping standpoint, though, it's usually more negative for me than positive. Nothing that happens out there is going to make a horse my pick that wouldn't have been anyway or had a chance to be, but I'll definitely downgrade off of poor work. The key to me is knowing what horses do on a routine basis, and that's why we bring in guys like Gary Young, Brandon Staubel, and Bruno DiGiulio that watch works all year and can actually say what's different or not. So the key to me is knowing who to listen to, but the hype surrounding it, second to none.
Well, guys, I'm really excited this year. We're going to take the Kentucky Derby workout show to an entirely new level. Starting Saturday, April 21st, 1-hour show, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. In addition to the Kentucky Derby and Oaks works and training, we're also going to have guest clockers. We're going to have trainers on set with us. We're going to give the news. We're going to talk about everything that's involved with the Kentucky Oaks and Kentucky Derby training, which is very important leading up to the first Friday and Saturday in May. For more details, visit KentuckyDerby.com/works.